This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor, and tonight the pressure is building across multiple fronts. On Capitol Hill, Republicans are pushing forward a voting bill that they do not have the votes to pass, but which critics have called one of the biggest voter suppression proposals in modern American history. At the same time, a congressional hearing raises new questions about whether the U.S. military could be pulled into American elections. And down south in Cuba, a nationwide blackout is drawing attention to a country where millions are out of power and where the United States has been tightening pressure, with the president talking openly about taking that country. Meanwhile, in Iran, a place we are currently at war, as the president is fantasizing about other wars, a top U.S. counterterrorism official has resigned with a bombshell resignation letter saying that the war was launched without a clear and imminent threat, while U.S. allies are now refusing to back the operation itself. And later in the show, we will be joined by Olivia, Troye, former national security official in the Trump administration in the White House, and a former employee of the National Counterterrorism Center, whose director just resigned today in protest against the Iran war. We will talk to her about that and all of these other stories today. Taken together, friends, these are not isolated. These stories show an administration in chaos. They point to a broader pattern that decisions in Trump 2.0 are moving forward without clear support, even from within his own caucus, that political fights are taking precedence over policy and out of the national interest, and that there are growing cracks both inside this administration and around the world in the Western alliance. We are going to walk through all of it tonight. This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. And we start tonight on Capitol Hill, where Republicans have been moving forward with a test vote on the Save America Act. This is the first step to bring that bill to the Senate floor. And they have been doing it even though they do not have the votes to pass this bill. Let me remind you what the numbers look like in Congress to try to pass this voter suppression bill, this bill that you've heard about that would require Americans to have an ID to vote, a bill that would make it impossible for my own wife to vote, as we figured out when we looked at the provisions. Republicans hold 53 seats in the United States Senate. This bill would need 60 votes to move forward. That would mean that Donald Trump and his MAGA movement would need Democratic votes to get this bill passed. They absolutely are not going to get that. In fact, even Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat who recently broke with his party on multiple issues, says he will not support the bill in its current form, even calling it, quote, unreasonable. At least one Republican, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, has already said he will oppose even bringing that bill up. So while Republicans may clear this first procedural vote, which it appears that they did, which would open debate up on the bill itself is still highly unlikely to advance to a final vote. And that's largely because of the filibuster. The filibuster, that Senate rule that allows one member of the Senate to go and speak and delay a vote on a bill, that allows one senator to make sure that something extreme does not pass. That filibuster is something that Donald Trump has targeted. That filibuster is something that Donald Trump has said he wants Republican leaders to destroy using the so-called nuclear option, which would remove that 60 vote threshold and would allow Republicans to pass a bill like this using a clean majority vote. However, Senate Majority Leader John Thune says he is unwilling to make that change. And he has reportedly told Trump outright that he does not have the votes to do so. Now, with Trump's continued pressure on this bill, it tells you everything you need to know. This is not about passing a bill. This is about forcing a political fight. And when Republicans in the House today were asked to defend the core premise behind that bill, preventing voter fraud, they struggled to name even a single example of that crime.
Go over here. Come on, all right, go ahead.
Okay, so the president has said that the Save America Act is his number one priority.
Yeah.
when making the argument to Democrats to vote yes for this, because it will require Democrats to pass, can you give for me one example of fraud conducted in a previous election that the Save America Act?
Look, we're not going to litigate all that. I can tell you what I'll tell Democrats. You should listen to the American people. Ostensibly, we're supposed to come here and represent the interests of the American people. This is a 90-10 issue in public opinion polling, and Democrats agree that you should be a citizen and have a photo ID to vote at a tune of about 70%. So,
and as this debate unfolds, the scope is already expanding beyond voting rules. During that hearing, lawmakers raised questions about the potential role of the military in domestic elections during a hearing on Capitol Hill with DOD officials, by the way. The response from Joseph Humer, the acting assistant secretary for Defense for Homeland Security and America's Security, raised serious questions about the role of the military in our elections. Take a listen.
I want to remind everybody who's listening to this that U.S. Section 592 and 593 criminalize both having troops at the polls and military interference with voting, conducting elections, or election officers. And so I'd like to ask the question that he didn't get an answer to, which is the midterms are in November. Will you collectively, representing the people who help decide where our troops are from North and South America, will you commit on the record before this committee that the Department of Defense will not deploy military personnel within sight of any polling places in November of 2026? Mr. Humeyer.
I'm not aware of any such direction that's coming, but I reserve the decision based on the president.
But sir, if the president told you to send troops to the polling places, would you do that on lawful act?
It would go through the same review process that we get from every request that comes from the White House. That we have legal compliance, we have lawyers, we have an office.
But there is a law already established and court history that says that it is not legal to do this. So you're not willing to say.
I can't speculate on what can happen.
In general, I keep hearing your name pronounced differently, Gio, I think. Would you commit that you will not send military troops to polling places in November?
Congresswoman, I'm aware that doing so is against the law, and I will not follow an unlawful order.
Thank you. I appreciate your honesty and your lawfulness. General Donovan.
I commit to the same, Congresswoman.
Thank you. I very much appreciate those straightforward and forthwith answers, and I hope, Mr. Humeyer, that you take a look at the law and follow it, a lawful order.
Take a look at that. Members of the military in uniform able to say very easily that sending armed U.S. troops to the polls would be illegal. But let me tell you what was scary about that picture. Those people in uniform do not decide the direction of U.S. policy in the Defense Department. We have in the United States what's known as civilian control of the U.S. military. That civilian you saw sitting there, the first person who couldn't answer the question. Those are the people in charge. Those are the people giving direction in the United States military. Let us hope that those men and women in uniform who have pledged not to follow illegal orders do not follow illegal orders. But I want to take a step back here and consider all of this. Today, on the Senate side, we have debate around a historic voter suppression bill that portrays itself as a bill to make sure that people don't vote illegally in elections, but which raises the bar so high that lifelong American citizens would struggle to be able to get the right identification documents in time to vote this November. And over in the House side, a hearing that laid bare the unwillingness of Donald Trump's personal appointees in the military to send armed troops to the polls. The light has been blinking red for the midterm elections. Today, it began to blink brighter. And there's another layer to all of this that is getting less attention. Some analysts interviewed by Reuters now warn that that voter suppression bill, the Save America Act, could end up hurting the very voters it claims to protect. Under the SAVE Act, many Americans would need a passport or birth certificate to register to vote, documents, as I noted, that millions do not have easy access to. Research shows passport ownership is the lowest in many of the same rural states that supported Donald Trump in 2024. And in some cases, voters could be required to register in person, creating additional barriers in areas where election offices are far away. Even some Republicans have raised concerns. Senator Lisa Murkowski warning that the bill as written could disenfranchise voters in her state. So the question here is not just whether this bill can pass, but who it would actually impact if it did. And if it does not pass, what this administration has in mind. I want to bring back into the conversation my Defiance.org co-founder, as always, Xander Schultz. Xander, look, I think there's no doubt at this point that this administration is going to meddle in our elections. They are delaying, signaling what that might look like as they try to meddle in those elections in a way that they would say is lawful by getting it passed by Congress, although a lot of legal analysts would say this bill is itself unlawful and would be challenged in the courts and likely found to be unlawful. But if this doesn't pass, which it likely won't, I think people worry that the Trump administration is going to extremes. I mean, the fact that you have members of Congress asking about whether U.S. troops will be sent to the polls should set off alarm bells, should it not?
I'm happy you said it should set off alarm bells. Look what I've got. I've got my impeachable offense alert finally in physical form. Yes, it should set off alarm bells. Unfortunately, we're having the wrong conversation about voting in this country. We do have a voting emergency in this country. It's the fact that only 40% of U.S. citizens turn out in midterms, right? Compare that to, we rank 30th out of 35 democracies that are measured on turnout. We have 60% turnout in presidential elections. Countries like Belgium or Sweden typically have 80 to 90%. There's a great conversation to be had around voting in America and the emergency around voting, and it's around participation. I mean, the most beautiful story of America, in my opinion, is moments of inclusion, right? This country started with, white men being able to vote, and then we had moments where we ended slavery and black men could vote, and then women could vote, and then we had the 60s and the Voting Rights Act. I mean, when I get the tingly feeling about being excited by about America, it's that story of inclusion. And there's so many things that we could do to include more people, right? We've got automatic voter registration that could happen. In countries like Australia, you get fined for not voting. Voting is compulsory. And so, we're in such a bizarro world where we are attacking non-problems with fervor, this administration is, and we're not, taking on, I think, the great project of having an inclusive democracy where everyone can vote.
Well, I would say, Xander, coming from the conservative side of the political spectrum, there's always been a sense that people should be able to prove who they are when they go vote, but that if you're going to place that requirement on people, it can't be some unfunded mandate. You can't set the requirements to get an ID at $185 to go buy a passport. If you're going to place that requirement on the most fundamental democratic right, then you have to have an easy, obvious, and fair system to make sure absolutely everyone for no cost can get their hands on the documents needed to go vote. And if they can't, that there's a remedy there on election day so that a lawful American citizen can vote, make sure their vote is counted, and either get that ID reissued on the back end. I mean, everyone who gets polled thinks that that's fair. If you're going to put that type of requirement in place, that it's only fair that you make sure that in this country, the benefit of the doubt is given to the American who has the right to vote, that the benefit of the doubt is not given to the conspiracy theory that people who show up to exercise their democratic rights are secret foreign operatives coming to stuff ballot boxes. A pretty expensive and complex way to hijack American elections.
There's easier ways to do this, gang. But
easier ways. Look,
it's such a bizarre thing, Miles, because I just made a wire transfer on my phone today, which does a scan of my face. Think about the financial institutions and these other institutions that use various forms of authentication now to make sure we are who we say we are. We not only are able to do that and are able to do very important things that have a big impact on our lives, like finance, very well on our devices. We do them on our devices, so we can do them immediately. We can make it accessible everywhere. And so this false challenge of, being able to prove people are who they are and make things accessible. It's like the private sector has already shown us it's a non-issue. We can do it with the technology we have. Everyone has a smartphone these days, even if you're not everyone, but the vast majority of people. There are lots and lots of tools in our toolkit to make sure that people can prove who they are and have access to information without having to even go somewhere physically. So we can crack this nut, and other industries have cracked this nut.
Yeah. Look, it's something you and I have talked about in the past with different folks who have looked at modernizing voting. There is a way to bring technology into this equation to deal with the voter ID worries of folks, which in most cases I think are very much misplaced, but also to increase participation. And I say that as someone who for a long time in government had worries about mobile voting because of the possibility of someone hacking the system and undercutting the vote. But we are at a place with the blockchain and encryption and technology to make it more secure to be able to vote in a mobile perspective. But that also, as you note, Xander, could increase participation dramatically. We've noted in areas that have tested out mobile voting, a massive increase in participation. So there's a solution here. And let's be clear, though, the way the SAVE Act has been approached is not as a solution. It has been approached very, very cravenly as a way to keep people that they don't want to vote from coming out to vote. And Donald Trump said the quiet part out loud when he said, if we pass this bill, they, as in the political opposition in this country, will not be elected maybe for 50 years. That should tell you everything you need to know. Xander, I'm going to take us into another story, not about democratic elections, but about a place that the president wants to go seize unilaterally, without elections, without a vote, and apparently without the consideration of Congress. But first, let me tell you about that place, Cuba, where the country's entire electrical grid collapsed this week, triggering a nationwide blackout affecting more than 10 million people. Hospitals have been disrupted. Food supplies are spoiling. Basic services across the island are under strain as officials struggle to restore power. That crisis comes as the United States and the Trump administration have intensified pressure on Cuba, including cutting off key oil supplies that the country relies on to generate electricity. In fact, some people now saying that the Trump administration may well be responsible for some of these disruptions we are seeing in Cuba. Now, the government of Cuba has long been criticized by U.S. officials, but what is drawing attention right now is how the administration is responding in the middle of this crisis. As the blackout unfolded, Donald Trump mused less about action, less about humanitarian assistance, and more about his power to take that country just because he can. Have a listen.
I think Cuba, is in its own way, if tourism and everything else, it's a beautiful island, great weather. They're not in a hurricane zone, which is nice for a change. They won't be asking us for money for hurricanes every week. But I think Cuba's the end. All my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders. Castro was a very violent leader. His brother's a very violent leader. Extremely violent. That's how they governed. They governed with violence. But a lot of people would like to go back. Okay.
Take it and do anything I want with it. Cuba is starting to sound less like a foreign policy challenge and more like a prize or a crown jewel, or perhaps the way Donald Trump used to talk about women. Something to take, something to make his home. Maybe a real estate deal, not a nation state, not a country that has sovereignty over itself. That mindset, of course, comes with a cost. We go to WRAL for a report on the country.
This morning, Cuba waking up in the dark. The country's power grid collapsing Monday. The crisis creating dangerous conditions and leaving residents outraged. This is an abuse. What will happen? It will be 2 or 3 days without electricity, and what little we have to eat spoils. Nobody says anything, and nobody has answers for anything, this man said.
During this latest blackout, people have been spilling out to the streets here for hours. Fortunately,
some cloud cover to keep them from this blistering heat. The blackout comes after NBC News' exclusive with Cuba's deputy prime minister, considered by many to be Cuba's economic czar, in charge of fixing the struggling economy by attracting more foreign investors, including large companies from the United States. Monday, President Trump was asked what's next for Cuba.
All my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of, I think I could do anything I want with it.
Among those in Cuba navigating the dim new reality of power outages are residents like Isabel Garcia. It's very hard, she said. What Cubans are going through is very hard. She took us inside her home to show us how she and her family are coping under the U.S. energy blockage and ailing infrastructure, using a bike light and cell phones to see, and buying food day to day to avoid the risk of things spoiling. It makes you want to cry, she said.
And doctors are now warning that thousands of patients who rely on dialysis in the country could die if the power crisis worsens. So this is the reality. A country in collapse, pressure from the United States making that collapse worse, and a president talking about control instead of stability, about ownership instead of diplomacy. And behind the scenes, there are reports of continued contentious talks between U.S. and Cuban officials, which raises the question, is there a plan here, unlike Iran? Or is this another situation where escalation comes first and the consequences come later? I want to bring Xander back into the conversation. Xander, it's galling to see the president of the United States talk about the invasion of another country when right now we are witnessing firsthand the extraordinary negative repercussions of his lawless invasion of another. I've got to think that this is should be seen as insane, and that maybe there'll be more resignations from the Trump administration. I don't know.
Doesn't this feel like this is what happens when a sexual predator is in charge? Like, I can take it. If I want to, I can take it. I'll just grab it if I want. This is the same logic that this guy's been applying for decades towards anyone who's weaker and less powerful than him, but now applied at this global scale. This is a predator that does what he wants, that is very Machiavellian in his thinking, that morality is just a roadblock in the way of power that weaker people put in place. This is like Hitler type thinking. And we're all fucking suffering for it because we empowered this douchebag. I was talking to someone today. In some ways, crazy people are crazy people. I think Trump is a narcissistic sociopath, and he is who he is. It's sometimes I'm so frustrated and angry at this guy, and I really need to replace that frustration and anger towards the non-insane people in Congress that are just continuously failing us for, I'm not sure what, for, I don't know, safety, for a role at the feet of King Trump later on. But there's all these competent freaking adults that are in Congress. They're just continuing to do freaking nothing about this, man. Like, to a certain point, Trump is a fucking maniac. He's going to act like a maniac. He's been acting like a maniac his entire life. We're dealing with, as I mentioned, a sexual predator, and also like this trust fund kid who's always been able to get things his way, this Nepo baby. And so, where are the adults, man? Like, where are the adults that said they wanted the ball, that ran for a higher office and wanted to, be there when this country had moments like this? That part is so frustrating, man. Watching these freaking poor people that were blockaded, and so they didn't have energy, and now suffering because of this is just, I don't want to be, one of those shows where we just show we're outraged and everyone's outraged, but it's just like, where the fuck are the adults in the room, man?
I'm going to let that question hang out there because that is the question right now. Where have they gone? Are these members of Congress going to show a spine? I mean, we had a vote on a war powers resolution on Iran that failed. They didn't want to rein in the president. They're going to allow the president to invade another country right on our doorstep, a country, by the way, that remains allies with the Russians. Do they remember the last time we ran this play? The last time we considered invading Cuba, and the Russians, the Soviets, put missiles there, created a crisis that almost led to nuclear war?
Yeah.
This is not how it's done. Now, we can argue about policy towards Cuba. It's an island that's broken, a regime that's broken. The people are needlessly suffering in poverty. It's an experiment in socialism that went completely awry. And if it hadn't, they wouldn't be having rolling blackouts. People wouldn't be pleading for food. Clearly, the regime in Cuba is not serving its people the way it should. But that doesn't mean that the regime in Washington should go invade that country to take it over. And by the way, that's clearly not what's motivating this president. I didn't hear a damn thing about taking care of people, their human needs and human suffering. I heard it's a beautiful island, beautiful piece of land. I heard a real estate agent talking about an acquisition.
Totally.
Right? When you hear Trump talk about Iran, you don't really hear him talk about the bravery of the Iranian people standing up to these brutal thugs. You hear him talk about 3 letters, OIL. You hear him talk about the assets. You hear him talk about the money. It was the same in Venezuela. It's been the same with every place Donald Trump has put his imperial eyes and considered an action. I mean, I remember when he was close to war with North Korea. It wasn't because there were important, geopolitical interests to advance democracy. It was because he said, wow, the northern part of that island, that would be really interesting to develop. You could do some great real estate development there. Extraordinary, folks. And we're having to reckon with the consequences. And I think, Xander, this week and next week, as gas prices don't continue to rise, as they hockey puck and likely soar amidst this conflict, people are going to be forced to wake up. They're going to be forced to reckon with their vote for this president if they voted for him and to reconsider what that means. And hopefully that includes members of Congress. Xander, that does take us to one note of dissent today in the headlines that we're going to talk about before we bring our guest in. A pretty big note of dissent, one of the most significant we have now seen in this administration and during the war with Iran. And that is a man named Joe Kent. The director of the National Counterterrorism Center resigned today. Donald Trump's top counterterrorism official, saying that he could not support the administration's decision to go to war. In his resignation letter, Kent wrote that Iran, quote, posed no imminent threat to the United States, directly contradicting the central justification the White House has used for military action. Joe Kent is a former Green Beret and CIA officer who was appointed by President Trump less than a year ago, and his departure makes him the first senior official to step down over the conflict. His resignation is drawing attention not only because of his role, but because it reflects a clear disagreement over the intelligence and the reasoning behind the strikes. To understand that shift, it's worth looking at how the president introduced Kent at the time of his nomination.
But I'd like to introduce Joe to say a few words. A very incredible guy and with a tremendous future, in my opinion. Right now, he's only thinking about Congress, and maybe he'll be there for a number of years, and we don't know what's going to happen, but I think this man has a tremendous future, a very special person. Thank you very much. Come on over, Joe.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much, Don Jr. and Kimberly. And thank all of you for being out here. This is absolutely amazing.
But today, Donald Trump called that same man weak, said that he had weak views on foreign policy and on security, that he was weak on security, but a nice guy. The contrast there is striking. A top counterterrorism official who was previously praised by the president and elevated is now being dismissed after challenging the president's justification for war. And the shift comes as Kent moves from supporting the administration's position to directly contradicting it, raising new questions about how dissent is handled at the highest levels. Now, the White House maintains that Iran posed a serious and imminent threat, and officials have rejected Kent's claims. But his resignation adds to a growing divide over how the decision to go to war was made in the first place, and whether there is room inside the administration for any official who disagrees. But Kent is not the only sign of distance from the administration, because U.S. allies are also continuing to step away from the United States and its war in Iran. As we reported yesterday, the White House suggested allies were prepared to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, but that does not appear to be the case. Several countries have declined to participate, and some have raised concerns about how the conflict began in the first place. Today, the president acknowledged that lack of support directly, writing that most NATO allies don't want to get involved in the military conflict. He went on to criticize those countries, arguing that the United States has spent decades protecting them while receiving, in his words, little in return. And in the same statement, the president also made clear he believes the U.S. does not need their help. Quote, because of the fact that we have had such military success, we no longer need or the NATO countries' assistance. We never did. We do not need the help of anyone. Remember, earlier this week, Donald Trump was bragging about pending announcements of how many countries were going to come into the conflict after declaring the United States needed the support of them to open the Strait of Hormuz. So at this point, you have growing divisions on two fronts. Inside this administration, with a top counterterrorism official stepping down over the war, and outside this administration, with U.S. allies unwilling to participate. Xander, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here. Joe Kent's resignation, I've got to say, is especially significant because of who he is. Not just the fact that he's the top counterterrorism official, which we'll talk about. This man is mega MAGA. He was a leader in the MAGA movement. When he got elected, his race was a referendum on whether the MAGA movement was going to dominate the party or whether moderate Republicans were going to retake the party after Donald Trump left. Joe Kent won his election when he was in the House of Representatives by running for a seat that was being vacated by someone who had voted for Donald Trump's impeachment. That was significant, that he was the MAGA insurgent in that race. And then, of course, he was picked to be a top counterterrorism official. Of all the people in the administration who could defect, having a mega MAGA person resign in protest is a big blow to this White House.
Totally. It's also nice to see someone resign on principle, even if I didn't agree with all of his principles. It's great to see that's still a muscle that some folks have. I mean, this coalition was always kind of doomed. Like, you can't be an expansionary empire and a nationalistic, group that wants to kind of just prioritize what's going on at home and never invest overseas. You can't be a free trade tech oligarch, capitalist, and also someone who's tariffing the world. There's it was always a broken promise. And instead of him picking like one piece of the coalition to kind of stay consistent with, he's just kind of screwing over everyone in various ways. And so anyways, it's great to see. It's a little scary in some ways. Miles, I want to pick your brain on this, and I don't want to scare our audience, but is there also something we've heard from many experts that say we don't have the defenses towards terrorism that we usually do? And is there also something maybe going on with this guy that says, I don't want to be the head of counterterrorism when something happens? And it feels like Trump has set us up for something to happen. Do you think there's a career opportunism thing going on here?
Well, I was just having this conversation with our friend Jim Acosta over on his show. Joe Kent doesn't say this in his letter, and it's a blistering letter. People should read it. He does not say that he's leaving because Donald Trump has put us in a position where we face a very serious terror threat. But you cannot divorce this resignation from the job Joe Kent holds. I mean, Joe Kent is the guy that's supposed to be on the 1 yard line, defending the end zone, defending the American homeland against terrorist attacks. And Donald Trump, in taking on this war of choice, has increased the terror threat level to the United States dramatically, has made Joe Kent's job dramatically harder. And what was so damning about that letter, Kent saying, it was a war of choice. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't based on imminent threat. And there's also some element of this, Xander, that has legal significance. Now, Kent stopped short of saying that the president had launched an illegal war in Iran. But remember, with the War Powers Act, presidents should only be taking action where there's imminent threat of harm, and then going after a certain period of time and getting congressional authorization for those wars. Joe Kent is effectively saying that justification did not exist. There was not imminent threat from Iran, and that the president simply chose to go to war. Now, one of two things has to be true, Xander. Either Joe Kent and his boss, who is the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, either they felt like there was no imminent threat, but they didn't share that intelligence with the White House, which would be damning, which would be a dereliction of duty, or more likely, they shared their views with the White House that there was not an imminent threat, that the intelligence did not justify going to war, and they were ignored by this president. I will tell you, in the wake of this resignation letter, the question in my mind is, what did Donald Trump know when? Because if his top intelligence officials told him, sir, there is no imminent threat, no imminent cause for war, and he went anyway, that's bad news for this president. That's impeachable news for this president. Because remember, this is not Democrats saying this. These are people in the MAGA movement in his own administration. Impeachment alert right there. And he needs to worry about that. He needs to worry about that because Joe Kent reflects how a lot of MAGA members of Congress are thinking right now. They may be cowards. They may be silent. They may not be doing what Joe Kent is doing and resigning in protest. But many of them think the same way that he does. And they have elections that they've got to go run in. Their constituents are angry. They are going to be the people who Donald Trump expects to have his back in the future if he is impeached. They're the people that Donald Trump expects to pass his agenda right now. They're the people he expects to vote on the SAVE Act. He's been hanging them out to dry. And now, with this resignation letter, you've got one pushing back. And, I don't want to glorify Joe Kent because this is a guy that has promoted conspiracy theories. This is a guy that has said that, the January 6ers were unfairly targeted. He has defended the people who conducted a domestic terrorist attack on the United States Capitol. He's no moderate, but it is so significant, Xander, to see someone central to the MAGA movement defect from it within the administration.
Totally. Miles, I also want to talk about Trump has this reputation as being this great businessman. We're in partnership now in this business. If I hired, call it 40 people, and I told you what geniuses they were when I hired them, and then when they left, I said they were always idiots, they're bums, you would probably take the keys from me on my ability to hire people. It's crazy that Trump's reputation doesn't get a hit out of all the people that he brings into his administrations that quit in protest or eventually, like you and our guest Olivia, who's coming on here, campaign against them, that they're always idiots. It's weird this guy's reputation doesn't take more of a bump from his clear inability to either maintain good people and he's lying about their quality or hire competent people according to him. This is this one thing that will save us in so many ways is the rotating chairs that the Trump administration always becomes because he is such an incompetent leader that is not only bad at outside game politics, but is bad at internal culture building and maintaining talent.
Yeah. And we're not even a business. We're a nonprofit. And if that happened, I would still say you were out the door. We have even less on the line personally in terms of our own, fortunes and futures. And I would still say it's unacceptable. And if that's the case here in, a club, it should be the case in the United States federal government. And, but I think, Xander, look, the good news for folks here is this is a sign of more to come. I mean, we use the analogy a lot. You see one ant crawling on the countertop, maybe there's an issue. You see two, there's an infestation you don't see. And we had Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out against the administration. We had Thomas Massie. We've now got Joe Kent. These mega MAGA figures are showing us that underneath the cabinet, there are a lot more ants. They may be quiet right now. They may not be showing themselves, but something significant is happening. I want to bring into the conversation our friend Olivia Troye, former White House official, former Homeland Security advisor to Vice President Pence, and a former National Counterterrorism Center intelligence official who can speak to this. Olivia, welcome to Defiance Daily. Good to see you, my friend.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey.
Good. I want to get your reaction, Liv, to this news. I know you and I have long seen Joe Kent before he ran for office, when he was running for office as a political radical. But in some ways, I had to put that aside to say today to say, wow, this is extraordinary that he is resigning in protest and so publicly. I mean, Kent could have easily said, "I'm out," but he didn't say, "I'm out." He said, "I'm gonna burn the house down on the way out."
Yeah, I think we used to call him Joe Kent. Wasn't that the nickname we used for him?
I think so. Yeah, I think that was the election line against him when he was running for Congress.
Yes, I remember that. And then I was equally shocked when he then got named to be the director of NCTC, considering I spent several years there and have worked with the directors of the agency very closely throughout my career. And I have to say, like, I think I worried about what that building would be like with the likes of Joe Kent and also Tulsi Gabbard at the helm. But now here we are. And I mean, I would say that was quite the headline this morning when it hit. I think for me, it was just really the fact that he blatantly kind of took on the president and said that the imminent threat of Iran, like it just, there was no there. And for him to come forward and say that, like I was listening to you guys, like, this is not someone that is a saint, right? I mean, this is a MAGA extremist kind of figure. He is not someone that, you know, I would certainly glorify in this role. But I would say, like, the fact that the head of an intelligence agency comes out with that kind of worded letter and also strongly states it so blatantly is quite significant given the situation that we are in when it comes to this expanding regional conflict that we find ourselves in with Iran.
Olivia, I'm gonna bring you into the Schultz household for a second. My wife and I were talking about going to New York City soon to visit some friends.
Mm-hmm.
And the question came up of, is that safe now? Is it safe to go to a place like New York City with the increased risk? And we had a debate around it. I just wonder, as a national security expert, we've been talking a lot about our defenses being down, likelihood of, you know, terror attacks taking place domestically. What's your advice for, you know, just our members, our viewers, people watching? How should they incorporate that into their lives? Should they be doing anything different? Should we all be doing anything different? I just wonder what an expert like you, what advice you would have.
Yeah, look, I think right now we are under greater threat level, no doubt. And I would say that, you know, it's important to be vigilant over your surroundings, just kind of be aware that that is the situation that we're in. And I think it's a grave injustice, by the way, to have the White House and leaders be downplaying kind of the threat of the reality of the situation. Like, we know that Iran often operates by proxies. We also, you know, in a situation like this, what I worry about is radicalization that's happening as we watch this conflict rise. And we are seeing it with some of the domestic attacks that have happened recently. So I think, you know, when you're going to the mindset, I would say, you know, just pay attention to your surroundings and also think about, like, pay attention to your cyber security posture. I would say that's one big thing. Also, my concern is threats to critical infrastructure, threats that are cyber related, threats to our banking systems. I mean, these are the things that all go through my head of, like, what this could possibly look like, especially when we know that a lot of the people that are usually tracking those threats, a lot of the longtime experts and national security people have been purged from the intelligence community, obviously. And, like, we've seen the report on that. We know it's true. I know friends that have been removed from their positions that were working some of these threats. And so I think that's something that we need to acknowledge that is real right now. I think it's going to be real for a while. Iran plays a long game. And so I think that's just something that, you know, we need to be vigilant about when we're traveling, especially overseas, I would say.
I want to get your thoughts, Olivia, on the reaction from Tulsi Gabbard. I don't have the quote in front of me right now, but about an hour and a half ago, Tulsi Gabbard put out a response, which was so late in the day. You know, she is Joe Kent's boss. She's the director of national intelligence. This was a damning letter that he put out. I would be surprised if she didn't know this was coming. And if she wants to keep her job, you would think what she would do is suck up to the president. She would, brush Joe Kent to the side. And instead, it was a very carefully worded statement. She said something along the lines of the fact that the president considered all information available to him and made the decision to launch the war with Iran based on, you know, the concern of imminent threat. She did not say that the intelligence community advised there was an imminent threat. She did not say that she had and Joe Kent agreed that there was an imminent threat. She just said that the president made the decision. She almost threw her boss under the bus rather than opposing him. I've got to think she is on thin ice right now, as much as she has been trying to suck up to the president by sticking her nose in domestic affairs. It seems like she couldn't bring herself to agree with the war in Iran. And the administration has reportedly been keeping her at a distance because she didn't agree with the war, which is worrying in its own right that the person, however crazy, who is director of national intelligence, is being kept out of the room during the decision to go to war. What's your take?
Yeah, I found that incredibly surreal when I read the reporting about that. How do you not include your director of national intelligence when you're going to be taking such a grave action, right, in a regional conflict like this, where we are actually going to war with a foreign adversary? So I thought that statement was definitely interesting, I will say. I mean, there's something to be said, like, she does sit at the helm of the entire intelligence community, right? And I think she knows that if the intelligence wasn't there along the way, I mean, she knows that that community is standing there watching her navigate the situation. But I certainly think, like, she is on thin ice. I watched people who were removed from their roles, who got basically removed from their roles as DNI during my tenure in the White House because they told the truth about what was happening with Russia. And so, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how she navigates this situation. And now you have someone that is part of her intelligence community who resides in the same building as her, and coming forward and putting the statement out. I mean, she's definitely in a very challenging situation right now on, well, okay, what do I do? We both sit in the intelligence briefings. We both have sort of been kept at bay, or she's been kept at bay as a representative of the community. And now you're boxed in figuring out how you're going to navigate the president, which we both know he will be the first to throw you under the bus when something like this happens.
Yeah. Olivia, we're starting to see like true MAGA defectors. How do you think we accelerate the MAGA defection? I think we all are having a sense that I hate to say the opportunity, because war is such a violent, terrible thing, but we're in the business of trying to steer America in the right direction. And there is this crisis, and it's fracturing a very important base of support for Trump. How do we accelerate that defection? What should we be doing as organizations, as leaders, as everyday citizens? How can we support that fracture more?
I know that it's challenging because you see these people and they have enabled some pretty horrific things throughout the past year, especially of what has happened here. And but what I would say is that I think a lot of these people, I wouldn't say a lot, but like the people that take a stand and you kind of see these divisions kind of happened, there are people that are paying attention, right? I mean, they're trying to navigate the situation here of this coalition where they're watching a president that campaigned and said no wars, and would consistently say on the campaign during the 2024 presidential campaign that if you went off and voted for Kamala Harris, that would mean war with Iran, and that would be the conflict that they would engage in, which was obviously interesting to watch the hypocrisy in play right now, given that he basically lied to his constituents. So what I would say in that partisan divide is I think that they are their own best messengers to their own voters. And I think, when we see someone come forward, I don't agree with a lot of, like, Joe Kent as a persona and his views and the things that he's done. His allies have been certainly extremist, dangerous characters that he's associated with himself with. But what I would say is, there is something to be said by looking at these divisions when they're calling out the president. And I think it's their truth to follow to their followers and say, look, I mean, you're hearing it from people within your own movement who are starting to question this and question, like, okay, we've been misled. Obviously, I mean, I'm a big believer that, like, they've been lied to throughout the entire past few years, because I've seen Donald Trump firsthand and how he sort of manipulates what he does to his followers and what he says to them. But I think we watch them, and I think it's, important to say, like, look, you're seeing this firsthand from your own people, your own supporters, your own community is saying this to you now.
What do you think, Olivia, ends up happening on Capitol Hill next? I mean, to me, there were a number of Republicans who did not want to authorize a resolution for war in Iran, but were scared to rein the president in when that vote came before Congress, and decided to basically give him a long leash for now, for the time being. I've got to think, as some of these people get more air cover from people inside Trump's administration, they're going to find themselves a little bit more courageous, because no longer do they have to be the first ones to step out there and say, this is a lawless war. They can say, well, the president's own team has said there was an imminent threat, so I just can't stand behind this. I mean, it seems to me they're now getting a fact pattern that they can use to distance themselves in a potential war vote that might come back up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, we know this, hopefully when people come forward and they have more to point to in these circles, I do think that it sort of helps them move along to give something. We'll say, well, this is person's own cabinet level person's pointing this out. So how do we kind of completely disregard that? Well, we can't. And so I think I'm hoping that there are conversations going on in Republican circles on the Hill, talking to each other, especially on the Intelligence Committee, especially on the Armed Services Committees, where they're looking at each other saying, okay, we know that the American public does not agree with this war. We have questions as to, why we decided to do this, maybe privately, and I'm sure that they do, because we know that this was done basically unilaterally. So I think in this moment, I do think there's opportunities there for them to leverage it and figure out how they're going to navigate the president. Look, we're going into the midterms. They know that. They know that this war is very unpopular. So it'll be interesting to see, to watch the Hill and see how these Republican members are going to figure this out and navigate it.
Beautifully put. Yeah. I mean, Olivia, just to go back to, something you said earlier, not wanting more wars is a virtuous principle, right? Like this desire that some Trump voters had, no matter what you care about their politics in totality, not wanting for America to go to war year after year after year for these kind of frivolous or kind of non-transparent reasons is a principle we can rally around. And so I'm just happy you mentioned that. And maybe we just keep creating space as we move towards these midterms for people that have that goal, and make sure that the opposition political party is echoing what they want to hear with actual intentions on following through on that promise. I'm happy you brought up the midterms coming up as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. We've seen it. Americans are not supporting this effort. Nobody wants boots on the ground. Right. I mean, I don't think that we're watching this. American service members are dying. Innocent people are dying right now. This is not something that, and then they voted in a president that they believed was not going to do this type of thing. And so I think that is important to really sort of stress that we're in a situation where he is threatening. Trump continues, he is not ruled out putting boots on the ground. And in national security circles, I mean, Miles, this, when we look at it from counterterrorism perspective, when we look at how this is playing out, there is grave concern that that's the direction this is likely going to go in if they're going to stick to what I would consider their whatever lack of strategy this is. I don't know how they get out of this is my concern. I don't know how this conflict ends. And I do believe that is a legitimate concern, that this is going to turn into a longer term situation. And I think Americans are not there. This is not what they wanted. They remember Iraq. We've seen how Afghanistan turned out. We don't do nation building well in the aftermath too, is what I remind people about. I love our military. I'm very patriotic. They serve our country and they do their jobs well. And in the aftermath though, as America, we go in, and the aftermath of what happens next has always been a challenge for us on what do we do? How do we navigate this?
Olivia, a final question for you, which would just be, Joe Kent, he may not be my cup of tea, but was considered a young-ish up-and-comer in the MAGA movement. I also wonder if maybe cravenly he made this decision because he sees that the winds are changing, that Donald Trump is no longer seen as an asset in Republican politics. He is trending towards liability. Do you think this is a bigger political statement on where the party might be headed and what their view is of Trump as the standard bearer?
Sure, I think it definitely, look, I think Joe Kent is looking at this and he has a choice, right? Does he become part of the hypocrisy? Because that's really what this is at this point. And all of these people have been there along the way, being front and center. And so now I think he's making a political calculus of, look, we can see how unpopular this is. Granted, he does talk about, his loved one that he's lost at war. Like I saw that in the letter. I acknowledge that. But the reality is, I think he is taking a step back and he's like, okay, the hypocrite now in this situation, when it comes to no more wars, is me. And we know that ultimately that's what happens when you're in the circle with Donald Trump. These people go in, they think that, it's going to be different from them. And ultimately they're the ones that end up holding the bag. So I think for Joe Kent, he is likely, seeing this and he's like, yeah, I don't think that I want to be continued to be associated with this Trump train. And I'm seeing the divisions in this movement. And I've chosen, to go to this side of the house and say, like, I don't think that, I don't know what the future looks like for this individual. And he's watching Trump circles around him. I mean, look, JD Vance, he is kind of started to try to figure out a way to step back from it. And I wonder, like, this will follow them. This will follow JD Vance. It'll follow Marco Rubio, who knows better, I would say, in the past, but he's decided to fall in line on this.
That's right. Well, as always, the incredible Olivia Troye is someone who has keen insight on this issue. I suspect, my friend, this is the beginning. I hope it's the beginning of more people to come distancing themselves from Trump's reckless decision. So thanks for shedding light on it, my friend. And as always, can you remind folks where they should be following you? Because they should be if they are not.
Thanks. I'm Olivia of Troye on Substack, and that's I'm on socials with that too. So I'll
Get
be here.
to all of them. Subscribe to all of
What a
them.
great
If you're not,
handle.
you're missing out. You're missing out. That's right. It's a great handle. Just
That's
years
awesome.
ago, I thought it was an accident that it was popping up in my phone. I was like, did I put Olivia in as Olivia of Troye? But it was intentional. It was intentional. Liv, thank you for joining us, my friend. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Stay safe, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Liv.
Miles, I had a thought. I know you're about to take us to our favorite section, but I had a thought I wanted to bounce off you real quick. Do you think, we've talked about Taki a little bit, the Trump attacks create icons or creates idols.
You don't even know
But
what it is. You came up with
I
it.
don't know
Trump
anymore.
always
I
creates
lost it.
Idols.
I
You
lost
said, yeah.
I lost it. We'll figure it out. We'll create a website one day. But that was an important moment where I think people started seeing the market opportunity on our side, on the pro-democracy side of attacking Trump. I wonder if Kent and Marjorie Taylor Greene's success coming up will also be important on the other side of the table. That defection is rewarded, that standing up for the isolationism that people voted for is rewarded. It's weird to say I'm rooting for the success of Marjorie Taylor Greene or Kent, but I think it might signal another kind of market opportunity that goes beyond morality or ideals or whatnot. That could be a really important moment in this fraction.
Yeah, an important bellwether. I agree with you. Although I think the more direct one right now might be, if money talks, where is it talking the loudest right now? And it's those conservative podcasters, the people who know their audience most immediately, are most worried about losing their audience. They are stepping out against this war. I mean, that has got to be a bellwether. And, clearly this White House isn't seeing it, or clearly the president isn't seeing it. I mean, we know some staff are terrified about the political impact of this war. And as the New York Times reported a week ago, too scared to tell the president about the implications. Well, these are the consequences that you get then. Xander, as you noted, we go into our final segment of the day, which is who is joining the Defiance. And today it comes from an unexpected place inside the Oval Office. You might be saying, Miles, there's no defiance inside the Oval Office. You just said people are refusing to speak truth to power. Well, the people who are around the president on a daily basis are refusing to speak truth to power, but someone visited the Oval Office who was willing to do so, at least to a certain extent. Ireland's Prime Minister Michael Martin met with Donald Trump in what was expected to be a routine diplomatic visit. It is, after all, St. Patrick's Day. Instead, it turned into a little something else. Photos from the meeting are already circulating, showing the prime minister appearing to hold back laughter during parts of the exchange. It is hard, I will tell you, to keep a straight face in the Oval Office when Donald Trump is going off on his stupid missives. But behind those moments, there was something more substantive. During that meeting, the prime minister made a direct case for immigration, not as a threat, but as an economic and cultural strength. Take a lolook.
Yes, excuse me.
Just first of all, I would say that Europe is still a very good place to live in.
Good.
Just to let you know.
I'm glad to hear that.
And our view is you have to have robust and fair rules around migration. But on the other hand, a lot of people, within the European Union, we have free mobility of people. And in Ireland, our population is growing, but in a very positive way. Our economy is going well because we're attracting a lot of people from Europe and beyond into work, legally and validly in our country. In fact, I'd love if we could develop a legal pathway between the US and Ireland into the future because of our history and so on like that, that we could have a legal pathway because no one is in favour of illegal migration or and so forth. So you have to have robust rules for that. But fundamentally, I think sometimes Europe gets characterised wrongly in terms of it being overrun or whatever like that. It's much more robust now. There's much more stronger mechanism in place to facilitate legal migration. I think it's important that understanding is there. We need more economic growth in Europe. It doesn't have the same focus on innovation as you do here in the US. We discussed that earlier with the Vice President in terms of technology, in terms of AI. We need to pivot more to innovation as opposed to regulation. I think investing in people, and that's the key to, I think, our collective future. But we do take there and listen.
Nice.
There it is, Xander.
That's
Making
nice.
the case that countries grow stronger when they remain open, when they have lawful pathways to citizenship, when they prioritize immigration. And I'm telling you, my friend, that's what the defiance looks like today. Ireland Prime Minister Michael Martin subtly sticking it to Donald Trump. And,
To
of
his
course,
face.
happy St.
You
Patrick's
get
Day,
extra
everyone.
points when it's right in front of him. That was nice.
Yeah, that was nice. That was well done. You could see him kind of walking into it, kind of hedging a little bit, but then going in there and making that case. And Donald Trump, probably too stupid to even understand what was happening, certainly to even come up with a rejoinder, but a powerful moment nonetheless. It was obvious what the prime minister was doing there.
Yeah, very cool.
We have time to take a couple of viewer questions. I know we're like 2 minutes into overtime, but we'll take some quick ones. If you are a defiance.org member, you are allowed to post in the chat on Substack. So if you are watching on Substack and you are a defiance.org member, put a question or two into the chat. Xander and I will try to quickly take those before we close out the show. And if you are meeting us for the first time, go take a look at defiance.org. See what we are all about, or you can check us out on Substack at defiance.news.
Miles, we got questions on if you should run for. Why don't you run for public office, Miles? Linda asks.
Well, Linda, short answer, I'm not really interested. That's it. It's not a good answer. Look, I'll tell you right now, the phase of life I'm in with little people, my wife, we want to stay away from that. I'd rather encourage people who have the fire in the belly to go be in public office right now, to go do it. I'd be the first to say, if your heart is not in it, don't go do it. And right now, my heart would not be in being in elected office. So better for me to find folks who feel animated to go do that. So Linda, maybe better you than me. So I hope there's something for you to run for back there at home. Xander, I see Don Buchter asks, question, can Trump and tech bros pull the plug literally on independent media? Well, look, Don, short answer there is hypothetically, yes. Hypothetically, the president of the United States has the ability to turn off the internet. And it was funny, a number of years ago, I said that before Donald Trump got reelected, and folks in conservative media were like, bah, ha, 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 this guy's worried about Donald Trump turning off the internet. Donald Trump possesses extraordinary powers as president, and that may sound like a silly, but it's something that a would-be autocrat could hypothetically do. Do I think Donald Trump is going to unplug us from the internet? No, but Don, you ask a good question. He has shown himself willing to go threaten to revoke the broadcast licenses of major networks. I suspect if I'd said the same thing a few years ago, people would have said on the right, no, he's not going to try to take away media's broadcast licenses. He's not going to turn off the news organizations. Well, he is, Don, as you know, and I suspect why you're asking the question, literally trying to or threatening to pull the plug on major news organizations. Could he do that to independent media? Perhaps. I suspect the courts would find it to be illegal if the purpose of it is to go after First Amendment protected speech. A president has the powers to shut down parts of major networks in national emergencies. You know, if we were under a massive cyber attack or if we were in a war, there are hypothetically those bills, I think, under the Commerce Act for, certain things to be disconnected. But to do that, to shut down First Amendment speech, no, that's not legal. So the big question, Don, is in such a circumstance, would our courts hold? Would the justice system hold? And I wish I could give you a confident answer to that question right now, but I can't. However, what I will say, the good news, independent media is vastly more resilient than broadcast media, and a really tough thing to shut down. If they tried to come after all of us in independent media, wish them luck, because they're going to have a hard time shutting us down.
Yeah, and you're seeing even like the attempts by the oligarchs to go buy social media platforms. Like that's probably like the most intense example of Trump allies trying to own the media is trying to buy these platforms. Users sniff it out and migrate pretty quickly. Like the value of those platforms gets destroyed pretty quickly. I mean, and the influencers on that are very good at migrating their audiences, calling it out and migrating somewhere else. And so even if we see a continued trend of, tech oligarchs and Trump-aligned oligarchs trying to buy platforms and change their algorithms and whatnot, I think, a lot of us in this movement, a lot of the members, a lot of the viewers of this program, but just a lot of Americans in general are right now in a season where they are deeply cynical about power in general. Who owns the platforms, who's in federal government, who runs these different industries. And so I think that the moment they start trying to enforce those policies on new media platforms, you're going to see migrations, you're going to see new opportunities, new platforms stood up that truly have the mission. I mean, Blue Sky's a great example, right? Musk bought Twitter off of, overpaid for it essentially. And then Jack Dorsey stood up Blue Sky. And now there's a pro-democracy Twitter stood up for anyone to go to and use. And we'll keep seeing that. So yeah, I think in some ways, Trump's attacks on these institutions are allowing us to create more resilient platforms and more decentralized platforms that are allowing us to even realize a more true and honest form of the First Amendment.
Yep. Xander, I want to throw one of the final questions here to you. Well, first, Deborah J asks, Miles, are you in a bunker? No, I'm not in a bunker, Deborah. I'm in like one of those phone booths, those meeting phone booths. It was the best opportunity to jump on with you all today while taking some meetings in Washington, D.C. But thank you for your concern, Deborah. I'll let you guys know if I make my way to the bunker so y'all can come join me. But Jean-Marie Gunner, sorry if I messed up the name, asked, what do you think about the CBS walkout today? A walkout, for folks who don't know, happened in San Francisco and the Manhattan offices of the broadcast centers. It's about contracts. I don't think it was necessarily about Trump, but it's not insignificant that people at CBS are getting upset about the new management team. I don't know, Xander, if you have a thought on that.
Yeah. Before I do, though, let me know in the chat if people want to do a GeoGuessr game on where Miles is at any given point. We can make that one of ours. Right after who joins the Defiance is just a GeoGuessr of where Miles is in the world.
There was a period where Hannah and I, we were on a cross-country trip across the United States for, I don't know, I guess we did that for like 2 or 3 months. And I was on Nicole Wallace a whole bunch during that time period. I do a lot of stuff.
I remember this. We were just doing the think tank.
Yeah, like a couple of nights, during the week, I'd be like in a national park, and then I'd be like near casinos in Vegas, and it kept getting crazier and crazier. We can do that again if you guys are cool with a cross country tour. I have to sell my wife on it, but But yeah, Xander, people walking out of CBS. Good news, bad news.
Fuck Barry Weiss. I don't have a nuanced opinion there.
That's his official
Burn that
position.
place down. It's fine. They're going to tank, to the point I was just making, they're going to tank their viewership because they're compromised. No one watches the news to see like a compromised opinion. So especially CBS, they already have Fox News if they want to go just have their, pre-existing opinions validated by sycophants. So, whatever. It sucks. It sucks that we lost an institution, but in some ways, like truly legacy media was already failing us. So, whatever. Accelerate the migration to new media. Let's move on to this next chapter.
Yeah. And look, I think most people, a lot of people watching right now are the types of folks who would say, that's not where I go first anymore. I don't go there first anymore because I don't trust it. I see that there is now a literal political agenda. These are organizations. I have a reflexive negative view. Anytime I see a CBS article, a link dropped in from someone, I'm like, Donald Trump orchestrated the takeover over there. Every article you're now thinking, did they filter this because of the politics of offending the White House? What information did they leave out because they're worried about offending the president because they're concerned that he could try to pull their broadcast license? I don't want to ask that question.
Totally.
In the news. And you can tune in here to Xander and I and realize there's no corporate overlord. There's no one we're scared of saying.
There's no production budget either.
There's no production budget either. But that also means
there's a little production budget.
We're unafraid to give you the truth. Even the president, joking aside, he arrested our friend Don Lemon. He has put me under investigation. Sorry, not going to scare me to tell you the truth about this administration. And we hope everyone has that disposition out there, whether they've been threatened by this man or not, to recognize that your rights are more powerful than him. And here's another truth. Your rights will live longer than Donald Trump. Your rights will literally outlast him. So stick with your rights instead of giving them up to a man who is mortal, giving them up to a man who is willing to trade them for his own self-interest. You can be pretty confident in that bet. I don't need Polymarket to tell me where to invest. I'm going to invest in my rights and my Constitution, outlasting this clown in the White House. And with that, Xander, I would urge folks, join us tomorrow, because every Wednesday on Defiance Daily, we do the weekly mission brief where we announce a real action that we are taking as a club, as a community, to combat Donald Trump's abuses of power. Nope, it's not just going to be commentating and doom scrolling tomorrow. Every damn Wednesday, we put our money where our mouth is. We do real things. We go invest in and spin up causes to take action. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking about Donald Trump's detention centers, Donald Trump's concentration camps, and real action we are taking with our partners to try to go get another one of them shut down. So come join us to hear that announcement. Come be a part of it. Come support this effort. This is a long-term effort to take out these detention centers, to make sure that we don't create a network of gulags in the United States under a would-be dictator. I hope you can join us. Xander, that's going to be a great one. We've got Steve Schmidt with us. We've got Maritza Georgiou with us. We've got Jason Stanley, best-selling author on authoritarianism. Jason Stanley will be back with us tomorrow. It's going to be a great program. You don't want to miss it.
I'm going to geek out a little bit.
Yeah.
I geek out anytime we're talking to Jason Stanley. It's just, I'm definitely, if you want to see me geek out talking to one of my favorite kind of authoritarian experts.
No, you should have been on the phone with Xander and I today. Xander called me, and, we usually on our Wednesdays, we have a panel at the top end, and, we've got multiple people, and, we're all big fans of Jason's writing, but, Xander said, do we really need a panel? Let's just have Jason. He said, come on, it's just Jason.
I join? Miles usually does the panel. I was like, can I join for the Jason piece?
Yeah, that'll be good. So it'll be great to have you guys with us tomorrow. In the meantime, friends, as always, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together. We'll see you tomorrow.